When I got married, I didn't mention the 3 apartments I inherited, not to my husband, not to anyone. And when my mother-in-law showed up a week later with a notary, I knew I had made the right decision. I didn't panic, I didn't run, I just smiled as if I'd been expecting her all along. That's what you do when someone comes to rob you. Politely offer them tea, then lock the safe while they're not looking. You want to know what happened next, don't you? Whether I signed the papers, whether she found out what I was hiding, whether my marriage survived the lies. Well, let's just say, that day changed everything. Some people think secrets ruin marriages. I think silence saved mine. And if you've ever had to protect something precious from a family who believes love gives them permission to control your life, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why I did what I did. My name is Amanda, and this is the story of how keeping quiet protected everything I built. But it didn't come without a cost. Before everything turned complicated, it was simple. I was just Amanda Brooks, a determined economics student from a quiet town, raised by a family who valued hard work more than appearances. My parents were both engineers, modest people who didn't care for drama. We lived in a small but cozy house where things didn't come easy, but everything was earned. But the person who shaped me the most was my grandmother. She owned a second-hand shop that smelled like old wood and lavender. It was the kind of place you only find if you're looking for something with a story. What most people didn't know was that behind that humble storefront, my grandmother was quietly building a real estate portfolio. Studio apartments, fixer-uppers, old buildings with charm. She saw potential where others saw problems. She taught me how to spot a good deal, how to manage tenants, and most of all, how to keep your mouth shut when the world is listening too closely. When I was 16, she looked me in the eye and said, "Amanda, some people inherit money, others inherit trouble. If you're lucky, you'll know which is which before it's too late." I thought she was being dramatic, but I remembered every word. She passed away in my 3rd year of university. A week before she died, she handed me a letter and told me to call her notary. The will left me 3 apartments scattered across the city, modest but valuable. All under my name. She'd made it clear, keep them quiet, manage them wisely, and never let love confuse ownership. Then came Liam. We met during an academic debate on monetary policy. He challenged my argument with a quirky metaphor about Schrödinger's cat, and I laughed for the first time that week. Tall, slightly awkward, but charming in the most genuine way. He had a kindness that didn't feel rehearsed. We grabbed coffee afterward and ended up talking for 3 hours straight. What followed were years of love that felt like a secret we got to keep from the world. We cooked pasta on a single burner in his dorm, took late-night walks arguing over music playlists, and read aloud from our textbooks to stay awake. He would text me reminders to eat, and I'd edit his lab reports. We were a team. Liam came from another world, though. His family had money, clean, well-structured wealth. His father was a retired colonel, respected and composed. His mother, Sylvia Monroe, was a picture of elegance, pearls, posture, and passive-aggressive questions. When I met her, she looked me over like I was a resume. Her compliments were always edged with warning. "You're so independent, how refreshing," she once said, her smile too tight. Not every girl without a trust fund knows how to take care of herself. I let it slide. Because Liam was worth it. When he proposed during a thunderstorm on campus, I said yes without thinking. He knelt in a puddle, holding out a ring that sparkled like lightning. "I know my mom might drive you crazy," he said, "but I won't let anyone come between us." I believed him. Our wedding was small, tasteful, just how I liked it. My inheritance wasn't mentioned. I wore my grandmother's locket but told no one what else she'd left me. The 3 apartments were rented, bringing in steady income, but I filed the taxes quietly, kept the paperwork in a locked box, and trusted Liam loved me for who I was, not for what I had. We moved into an apartment his father had bought years ago. It was modern, clean, and came with strings attached. His parents still had a key. Sylvia would drop by just to water the plants or leave some homemade muffins, but I knew she was checking up on me. Still, I didn't complain. I wanted to build something lasting with Liam, not just a marriage but trust, stability, a home. Love, I thought, would be enough. I didn't know then how silence would become my armor. Or that one day, that silence would be tested in the most invasive, calculated way imaginable. At first it was just little details I told myself not to overthink. Like the way Sylvia would walk into our apartment without knocking, claiming she forgot to text, or how she'd rearrange my spice rack, then smile and say, "Just making things more practical, dear." Liam tried to smooth it over. "That's just how she is," he'd say. "She means well." Maybe, but it didn't feel like kindness. It felt like control. And it got worse. One evening, I came home from work to find Sylvia in our kitchen, elbow deep in my pantry. "You really should consider buying in bulk," she announced, pulling out a bag of rice. "Saves money. And space. You know, if you had more experience with homemaking, these things would come naturally." I swallowed my frustration and smiled, but inside something twisted. This wasn't her home. This wasn't her life. But somehow, she was acting like it was. Then came the questions. "Where are your payslips, Amanda? I could help you track your budget," she said sweetly, as if she wasn't asking to dissect my private finances. "Do you file your taxes yourself? You really should let someone more experienced take a look." I deflected as politely as I could, but she kept pressing. With Liam's extended family, Sylvia turned to me and said, "Amanda's background is so modest, isn't it refreshing? I think it's good for our family to have someone grounded. Of course, it means we'll need to guide her more carefully. Finances can be overwhelming for people without exposure." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. No one said anything, not even Liam. Afterward, when I told him how humiliated I felt, he frowned. "She didn't mean it like that. You know how Mom talks. She's just old-fashioned." That's when I realized something vital. I wasn't imagining things. I was being handled. Subtly, quietly, skillfully. Sylvia wasn't attacking me outright. She was undermining me, softening the edges of my independence, pushing her presence into every corner of our lives. She questioned how I folded laundry, what groceries I bought, how much I spent on toiletries. When I applied for a certificate program to level up at work, she raised her eyebrows. "Do you think it's wise to spend on that? Shouldn't you be focusing on children soon? You don't want to be too career-minded. Liam deserves attention too." I wanted to scream. But instead, I smiled, nodded, filed the comment away. Because what could I say? That I felt like a guest in my own home? That my every decision seemed to require her approval? Then came the unspoken curfews. If Liam and I returned home late, say from dinner or a walk, there would be a text from Sylvia, "All good. I noticed you came back around 11. Everything okay?" I once mentioned I might meet an old friend from college for lunch, and within hours Sylvia sent me a message. "Liam didn't say anything about you being out. Just wanted to check everything's all right, you know, in case something happens." She masked control as concern, but I could feel the leash tightening. One day, while folding laundry, I noticed something missing, an old photo frame from my grandmother, usually on our bookshelf. I searched everywhere and finally found it tucked behind the sofa. When I asked Sylvia if she'd move it, she blinked. "Oh, that dusty thing? I thought it was just clutter. You can put it back if it means something." It did mean something. It meant she didn't see me, or worse, that she did and wanted to erase pieces of who I was. The last straw came when she offered to help by calling a financial advisor she knew. "He's wonderful," she said, "specializes in consolidating family assets. Maybe we can all sit down and talk options?" That word of family assets stuck in my throat. I hadn't told her anything. She didn't know, but it was like she sensed something. She was digging, pushing, waiting for me to slip. I looked at Liam, and for the first time, I wondered if he'd ever truly see what was happening. Or if I'd have to fight this battle alone. That night, I lay awake in bed beside Liam, staring at the ceiling. His soft breathing told me he was already asleep, unaware of the storm building just beneath our calm exterior. I turned toward him, tempted to wake him up, to say, "Do you not see how I'm drowning here?" But I didn't. I turned back and whispered to myself instead, "This is my life now, unless I do something about it." It happened on a Thursday. I remember because it was the day I wore my favorite blouse, the pale blue one my grandmother gave me on my graduation. I wore it whenever I needed courage. I didn't know I'd need it more than ever that morning. Sylvia showed up again, this time not alone. She brought someone with her. A tall man in a gray suit with a briefcase. He looked like every lawyer you see in court dramas. Polished, unreadable, and just a little too confident. "We just need a few signatures," she said breezily, stepping inside before I could answer. "Nothing complicated. Liam's father and I are updating our estate planning, and since you're part of the family now, it's best to clarify everyone's assets, just to avoid legal confusion later." I stood frozen. "Asset." Before I could ask more, the man opened his case and pulled out a stack of documents. Sylvia smiled at me. "It's just a standard prenup supplement. You know, in case there were undisclosed assets from before the marriage, it protects everyone." Undisclosed assets. My heart dropped. She knew, Or she suspected, or she was bluffing and hoping to corner me. "Where's Liam?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "He's at work, dear, but he'll sign later," she said casually. "This is mostly about you." "Mostly about me." I glanced at the top page. Legalese, clauses, terms. Then one line caught my eye. "All premarital property, once discovered, shall be treated as shared marital assets unless explicitly excluded and declared." I felt sick. This wasn't a family errand. This was a setup. I closed the folder gently, looked at Sylvia and smiled. "I'd prefer Liam be here when I sign anything." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "But you have nothing to hide, do you?" That line. It wasn't a question. It was a trap. I opened my mouth, then shut it. This was dangerous ground. I stood up straighter. "I appreciate your concern, Sylvia, but I'd feel better if Liam reviewed this first." She looked annoyed. "Amanda, I'm only trying to protect everyone. In families like ours, transparency is important. Surprises ruin trust." I held her gaze. "Exactly, which is why I won't sign anything behind my husband's back." There was a silence, sharp, electric. The man in the suit closed his briefcase. "I'll come back when both parties are present," he said smoothly. Sylvia walked out with him but paused at the door. "You know, Amanda, in this family we value honesty. If there's something you're keeping from Liam, it won't end well." I shut the door behind her. Locked it. Then I sank to the floor and stared at the contract in my hand. She knew. Or worse, she didn't know, but suspected enough to weaponize the law. And Liam, what would he say if I told him? Would he understand why I kept it quiet, or would he see it as betrayal? The next day I told him everything. I sat him down after dinner and handed him the contract. "Your mom came by yesterday," I said. "She brought a lawyer." He frowned. "Why?" "She wanted me to sign this." I showed him the clause. His face tightened. "Did you?" "I wanted to talk to you first." He exhaled. "Why would she even think?" "I think she knows, or suspects, about my grandmother's apartments." There was a pause. I continued. "I inherited them before we got married. I've kept them quiet, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wasn't sure if your family would ever accept that I had something of my own, something I didn't want to share." Liam was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him. "Because I wanted our relationship to be real, not about assets, not about what I brought into the marriage. I needed to know you loved me for me." His expression was unreadable. "Do you not trust me?" "I do," I whispered, "but I don't trust them." He stood up, walked to the window, then turned back. "You should have told me, Amanda. I would have protected you." His voice wasn't angry, just disappointed. Which, somehow, was worse. That night, we didn't talk much. I lay awake, wondering if I'd broken something I couldn't fix, wondering if Sylvia had gotten exactly what she wanted. A crack between us. And a shadow over everything we'd built. Over the next few days, things between us changed subtly but undeniably. Liam wasn't cold. He didn't raise his voice, but something in his eyes had shifted. When he kissed me goodbye in the mornings, it was slightly too quick. When we sat on the couch, his hand found the remote more often than mine. It was as if he was retreating, not just from me, but from everything he didn't know how to process. And I hated that Sylvia had caused this crack, that she had inserted herself so deeply into our marriage she could weaponize my silence against me. I started second-guessing everything. Should I have told him from the beginning? Was I naive to think love could protect us from wealth? Was it fair to carry my past like a secret, even if it was out of self-preservation? I wanted to rewind time, to before the contracts, before the inheritance, before the line between honesty and self-defense blurred. But all I could do was wait, and hope that the truth, however delayed, would still matter more than the silence. And that Liam would remember who we were, before all of this. One night, I sat alone in the kitchen with the lights off, just listening to the quiet. The refrigerator hummed, a car passed by outside, and I whispered to the silence, "Please, let him understand." Because if he chose her side, I didn't know how much more I could give without losing myself completely. I couldn't sleep. Every night, I lay awake, replaying Sylvia's words in my mind, her offer, her warning, her smile that never reached her eyes. "If you know what's good for this family, Amanda, you'll keep this between us." What did that even mean? What family, hers, mine? I wanted to scream, to tell Liam everything, but every time I looked at him I froze. What if he didn't believe me? Or what if he did but still chose her? I moved through the days like a ghost. The apartment buzzed with silence. Liam, caught up in work, barely noticed the change. Or maybe he did, and just didn't know what to do. I didn't either. I started avoiding the places Sylvia frequented, skipped brunches, turned off my phone. Even grocery stores felt threatening. What if I saw her? What if she saw me and smiled that smile again? I thought about leaving, not forever, just for air, but I stayed. Out of habit, fear, love. I didn't even know which anymore. One evening, I finally texted my cousin May. "Can I talk to you, please?" She called immediately. Her voice was soft, grounding. Within an hour, I was sitting in her kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug I didn't drink from. "I'm losing myself," I whispered. She didn't ask questions, just waited. And slowly, the words came. I told her everything: Sylvia's veiled threats, the pressure to keep quiet, the confusion that clung to me like a second skin. May listened. Her silence was warm, not judgmental. When I finished, she said, "Amanda, love isn't silence. It's not pretending everything's fine so someone else can feel comfortable. If you can't be honest in your marriage, what are you protecting, him or his mother?" I looked down. "I'm protecting the version of him that doesn't exist anymore." She reached over and touched my hand. "You don't owe anyone your silence, not even him." But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I went home and sat in the dark. Liam was asleep on the couch, one arm slung over his chest, mouth slightly open, so peaceful, so unaware. I stared at him for a long time. How do you tell the person you love that someone they trust is slowly poisoning everything? I didn't have the answer. So I stayed quiet. Over the next few days, I rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 times. "Liam, your mother came to me. She said things I can't ignore. She tried to manipulate me, and I don't know what to do." But every version ended the same way, in silence. Because I couldn't predict his reaction. Because part of me still wanted to protect him. I watched him closely now, studied his habits. Did he seem colder, or was that my paranoia? Did he already know what Sylvia had done, or was I projecting my fear onto him? He still made coffee in the morning, still folded the laundry, still kissed my forehead when he thought I was asleep, but it all felt distant, like someone following a script they no longer believed in. One night, I sat on the bathroom floor, hugging my knees to my chest. The tiles were cold, the quiet was loud. I imagined what it would feel like to just vanish. Not die, just disappear long enough for the world to reset. Of course I didn't go anywhere. I brushed my teeth, tucked myself into bed beside him, and stared at the ceiling for hours. In the middle of that same night, I whispered into the darkness, "If you really loved me, Liam, would you believe me?" He didn't stir, or maybe he did, and just didn't respond. The next day, May called. "You don't have to confront everything at once," she said gently. "But don't let silence become your prison. Promise me that." I did. Sort of. At least, I promised to try. And that was more than I'd done in weeks. It began with a corkboard and a sharp eye. Sylvia, ever the observant one, was attending a charity event downtown when she noticed a familiar address posted on a lease agreement in the lobby. The building was newly renovated, sleek, and only a few blocks from where Amanda used to work. At first, it was just curiosity that drew her closer. But then, her gaze landed on the name typed neatly across the bottom of the lease: Amanda Carter. What confirmed it beyond doubt was the email address listed beneath it, unmistakably Amanda's, complete with her legal signature. She arrived at our apartment early the next morning, without warning, the air tense immediately. Sylvia started casually, with a cutting undertone. She mentioned her visit to the building on Ashgrove Lane, asking Amanda if she happened to know anything about it. When Amanda admitted she owned a unit there, the conversation turned. Sylvia's mask of politeness dropped fast. She accused Amanda of deception, of hiding wealth, of manipulating the marriage with secrets. Her words were laced with judgment, sharp and cold. Liam sat still for a moment, stunned. Then, his voice dropped low, controlled, but there was steel in it. He asked Amanda why she hadn't told him. Amanda, her voice trembling but steady, explained that she hadn't meant to hide it out of malice. She'd built those properties before they'd even met. She'd simply wanted to protect something that was hers, something she was proud of, afraid that if she shared it, it might be twisted or dismissed. Sylvia scoffed, her tone bitter. She threw accusations freely, claiming Amanda had undermined the family, disrespected the bond of marriage. She demanded to know what else had been kept hidden. She called Amanda manipulative. That was when Liam stood. His voice rose, not in a shout but with unmistakable finality. He told his mother she had no right to speak to Amanda that way, that she had crossed too many lines for too long, and he had been a coward for not stopping it sooner. Sylvia tried to interrupt, invoking her title as his mother. But Liam cut her off. "And Amanda is my wife," he said, "my equal. You don't get to treat her like she's less. She's stood beside me with patience, love, and silence you never earned. I've watched you chip away at her confidence for months. This ends now." Sylvia, visibly shaking, asked if he was choosing Amanda over his own family. Liam didn't flinch. "I'm choosing the one who's never asked me to choose." Amanda tried to calm him, placing a hand on his arm, but he didn't back down. He told Sylvia to leave. When she hesitated, he didn't yell. He simply walked to the door, opened it, and waited. The sound of the door closing behind her was like a full breath after months underwater. Later that evening, Liam wrapped Amanda in a quiet embrace and apologized, not just for that day but for all the days he hadn't spoken up. They sat together, sharing fears and truths that had gone unsaid. Amanda showed him her records, the leases, the plans, the goals. Liam listened in awe. "You've done all of this," he said, his voice full of wonder. She nodded. "Before you, and during. I just didn't know how to share it without losing part of myself." He kissed her forehead. "You never have to lose anything. I love that part of you, the builder, the fighter." In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild, openly, without secrets. Liam canceled Sunday brunches with Sylvia, prioritizing their time together. He supported Amanda's business, helped with spreadsheets, and learned about investment strategy. He didn't just cheer her on, he stood beside her. That weekend, they escaped to a cabin upstate. No Wi-Fi, no calls, no interruptions, just the sound of trees and the crackle of a fireplace. They cooked meals together, walked along quiet trails, and talked, not just about the past few months, but about dreams they hadn't voiced in years. Amanda shared her vision for expanding the rentals into a small property firm. Liam, for the first time, saw not just her drive. He promised to be more than just supportive. He wanted to be involved, genuinely. "You're not just my wife," he said, eyes warm. "You're a force. I want to build with you, not just watch." Amanda didn't cry. She smiled, and that smile, full of quiet relief, said everything. They returned to the city not just as husband and wife, but as partners. And from that moment on, everything shifted. Amanda and Liam moved into a sunlit two-bedroom apartment nestled in the heart of a quiet neighborhood. One of Amanda's properties finally claimed not just as investment but as home. They left behind the shadows of his family estate, the passive-aggressive breakfasts, the silences that cut deeper than words. This new space was filled with light, intentionality, and peace. No unannounced visits, no glances heavy with judgment. For a while, it felt like breathing again. Liam flourished in the quiet. Amanda, too. She repainted the kitchen cabinets herself, tracked the market trends, and expanded her rental listings. Together, they cooked dinner every Sunday, laughed over mismatched spice jars, and talked about things that mattered: finances, boundaries, the kind of family they wanted to be. But peace, she knew, never lasted long when Sylvia was involved. The call came one Wednesday afternoon. Amanda recognized the number even before she answered. "Amanda," Sylvia said without preamble, "we need to talk, as a family." Amanda agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, neutral ground. Sylvia didn't waste time. Seated beside her husband and Liam's brother, she laid it out flat. They were starting a new venture, a retail franchise, and needed capital. A modest investment, she called it, just enough to secure a lease and initial inventory. She had heard Amanda had resources tucked away. Surely she'd want to support family. Amanda smiled politely. "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I've already allocated my funds for the quarter. I'm committed elsewhere." Sylvia blinked. "Amanda, we're family." "And family," Amanda replied evenly, "means knowing how to respect each other's boundaries, especially financial ones." Sylvia's expression soured. Liam watched quietly, his hand resting on Amanda's knee. The conversation turned tense. Sylvia pressed harder, guilt-tripping, referencing past holidays, sacrifices made for Liam's education, even Amanda's engagement ring, subtly implying debt owed. But Amanda didn't flinch.
She spoke clearly, graciously, but with precision. I believe in financial transparency and responsibility. It's how I built what I have. If I were to invest, it would be through a formal proposal, risk assessment, and terms agreement, not a coffee meeting. Sylvia's eyes narrowed. Her husband shifted uncomfortably. You think you're better than us now? She hissed. Amanda smiled. No, I just think differently, and I protect what I've earned. Liam finally spoke. Mom, if Amanda says no, it's no. We support each other. That's not disrespect, that's partnership. Sylvia stood abruptly, muttering something under her breath. But she didn't argue further. Not with Amanda. Not this time. After they left, Liam squeezed Amanda's hand. I've never been prouder. Amanda exhaled slowly. The old her might have avoided conflict, might have compromised just to keep the peace, but not anymore. Back at their apartment, Amanda updated her financial dashboard, adjusted her forecasts, and scheduled a new viewing for an upcoming property. Liam brewed tea. They sat by the window, legs touching, silence warm between them. I didn't just fall in love with you, Liam said. I trust you, and I want to keep learning from you. Amanda looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the boy she married, but the man he was becoming. Powerful, respectful, aligned. She knew the family might try again, but she also knew she had drawn a line, and this time it would hold. Because strength wasn't loud. Sometimes it was a quiet no, said without apology. And Amanda had finally mastered it.
The next few days brought silence from Sylvia. No dramatic follow-ups, no late-night calls, just absence. And in that silence, Amanda felt something unexpected: relief. She and Liam began setting clearer boundaries, not just with his family, but with their shared lives. They reviewed insurance plans, restructured a joint emergency fund, and even met with a financial planner together. Every choice felt deliberate. Every document signed meant they were shaping something that truly belonged to both of them. One evening, Amanda received an email. It was from Liam's younger brother, a short message. I get it. She pushed you too far. For what it's worth, I respect how you handled it. Amanda stared at the screen, surprised, then typed, thank you. I hope your business idea finds the right path, and meant it. She wasn't bitter. She was done proving herself. In their new home, Amanda hung a painting her mother had given her, a landscape of mountains, calm and vast. It reminded her of everything she had endured to get here. The uphill battles, the long silences, the moments she nearly bent herself into someone else just to fit. Not anymore. One night, as the city lights flickered beyond their window, Liam turned to her. Do you ever regret it? Amanda looked at him, leaving the house, saying no? All of it. She shook her head, not for a second. He smiled. Good, because I've never felt more like myself than I do right here with you. And that, more than any signature on any lease, told her they'd truly found home. It happened quietly, like most downfalls do. The family business, Liam's parents' ambitious retail venture, had crumbled within 6 months. The lease fell through, suppliers backed out, and overhead costs devoured what little remained of their capital. Liam's brother moved out of state to regroup. Their father withdrew into silence. And Sylvia, she fell ill. At first it was fatigue, then dizzy spells, then a diagnosis that required immediate treatment. But with their savings gone and no insurance to cover specialized care, the hospital bills stacked quickly. Liam found out through an old neighbor Sylvia hadn't even called. Amanda could have ignored it. She had every reason to: the insults, the judgment, the years of disapproval. Even recently, Sylvia's attitude had only softened because her power had diminished. But Amanda didn't hesitate. She called the hospital directly, settled the outstanding invoices, and arranged for Sylvia to be transferred to a better facility. She didn't ask Liam for permission. She didn't need to. She simply told him, and he held her hand in silent support. A few days later, Sylvia asked to see her. Amanda walked into the hospital room to find Sylvia thinner, paler, and quieter than she'd ever seen her. No makeup, no polished jewelry, just a woman in a worn hospital gown, stripped of pretense. Sylvia looked up. You didn't have to do that. I know, Amanda replied. There was a long pause. The hum of machines filled the silence. I've been cruel to you, Sylvia said finally, jealous. I saw how capable you were, and I hated how it made me feel small. Amanda said nothing. I thought control made me strong, but all it did was isolate me. Amanda sat down. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do, Sylvia insisted, because you gave without asking for anything back, and I never taught my sons to love a woman like that. That's on me. Tears welled in Sylvia's eyes. Amanda reached for a tissue but didn't speak. I'm sorry, Sylvia said, voice cracking, for everything. Amanda nodded. I accept your apology, but I don't need it to keep doing what's right. Sylvia laughed weakly. That's exactly why you're stronger than me. From that day on, the dynamic shifted. Sylvia didn't transform overnight, but she softened. She asked Amanda questions. She listened. She said thank you. For the first time, Amanda saw not the enemy, but the hurt woman behind the bitterness. And for Sylvia, she saw not the threat she once believed Amanda to be, but the daughter she never allowed herself to embrace. They were still different, still learning, but there was grace now. And sometimes, that was enough. Amanda visited weekly. She brought fresh fruit, books Sylvia once mentioned in passing, even a small potted orchid for the windowsill. Their conversations remained cautious at first, weather, hospital food, television. But slowly, they deepened. Sylvia started asking about Amanda's business, genuinely curious. She asked how Amanda chose neighborhoods to invest in, how she managed tenants, what it felt like to build something on her own. Amanda shared, surprised by how natural it felt. There was no edge to Sylvia's tone, no disguised criticism. One afternoon, Sylvia took Amanda's hand. I never realized how brave you are. You built your life from scratch. I clung to what was given to me and still managed to ruin it. Amanda shook her head. You didn't ruin everything. You raised a man who stands beside me, not in front. That counts. Sylvia squeezed her hand. I just hope it's not too late to be someone better. It's not, Amanda said simply. That spring, Sylvia was discharged. She walked a little slower, her voice was softer, but she left the hospital not just physically lighter, but emotionally changed. Amanda didn't expect miracles, but she welcomed sincerity. And in that fragile honesty, something new began, not a truce, but a tentative kind of trust. Spring brought warmth, and with it, something Amanda hadn't felt in a long time, ease. Not comfort, not luxury, but ease. The kind that comes when you no longer shrink to fit someone else's expectations. When your silence is not a shield but a choice. That when love isn't a negotiation but a steady presence. Sylvia was recovering steadily. Though her hair was thinner and her steps slower, her voice held a gentleness Amanda hadn't known she was capable of. Liam's father, once a distant figure, had started joining their family dinners again. Quiet, humble, grateful. Amanda still kept her boundaries. She didn't overshare, she didn't apologize for her independence, but she no longer needed to prove anything. One evening, as they sat together on Sylvia's balcony, overlooking the streetlights, Sylvia said softly, You've changed everything in this family, not by force, just by standing your ground. Amanda didn't know what to say at first. Then she smiled. Sometimes the quietest things leave the loudest marks. Over the following weeks, Amanda began mentoring a young woman who reminded her of herself years ago, sharp, driven, and just a bit afraid. They met for coffee on Fridays. Amanda shared more than just strategies. She shared missteps, regrets, and hard-earned boundaries. Don't apologize for protecting what's yours, Amanda told her one day. You can be kind and still have steel in your spine. At home, Liam thrived beside her. He took on new projects, backed Amanda's ventures, and often said, We're building this together. He meant more than business. He meant legacy. One Sunday morning, Amanda walked through the apartment, sunlight streaming over hardwood floors, the smell of coffee in the air, Liam humming softly from the kitchen. She paused at the bookshelf, where a photo sat, Sylvia and Amanda side by side, smiling. Not for show, but from something real. This was her family, not perfect, not without pain, but real. And Amanda, at last, felt whole within it. She had learned that being good did not mean being small, that generosity didn't mean surrender, that protecting her assets, her peace, and her voice wasn't selfish. It was necessary. She learned that love flourishes where respect lives. That family isn't about fitting in, it's about being seen. And that being a wife, a daughter-in-law, a woman, didn't mean giving up who you were, it meant becoming more of it. Amanda had fought hard, but not through battle. Through clarity. Through grace. Through choosing herself, again and again. without apology. And in doing so, she hadn't lost her family. She had reshaped it. Amanda and Liam planned a small anniversary gathering later that summer. Just a few close friends and family, nothing extravagant. Sylvia offered to help, something she never would have done before, and even baked a pie Amanda once mentioned liking. During the toast, Liam raised his glass. To the woman who taught me what partnership really means, not obedience, not perfection, but balance, trust, and quiet courage. Sylvia clinked her glass against Amanda's. To the daughter I never knew I needed. Amanda blinked away tears, not because she needed their approval, but because it no longer cost her anything to receive it. She had not changed to be accepted. She had been accepted because she refused to change. And in that truth lay the lesson she would carry forward, not just for herself, but for every woman watching, wondering if softness and strength could ever live in the same heart. They could. Amanda was living proof.